How's it going, everybody? This is Carlos, one of your hosts of the Bring on the Blitz podcast, part of the RS Skinner Podcast Network. And I'm here with the great, the one and only, the Hall of Famer himself, John McClain. How's it going, John?
If it was any better for me, it'd be illegal.
Right? Yeah, no, thank you for coming on the show. As always, John, you're one of
Sure,
our favorite guests.
my pleasure.
So I actually, personal story, I just saw John not long ago, about a week ago, at Dick's Sporting Goods, and he was interviewing legendary Hall of Famer coach Van Chancellor. What an amazing treat for all of us that were there, just seeing you interview such a legendary coach for the comments. What was that experience for you?
Well, one of our producers we're on our fourth documentary now. Rob Lynch asked me if I would interview some people as far as the Dick's Sporting Goods 713 series. And I said, sure, because I love interviewing people, especially when they're a captive audience. And you never get a chance to interview somebody for an hour when they're a coach or a player. But in this case, we did. First one was Bill Brown, legendary Astros broadcaster. Second one was Gary Kubiak. And the third one is Van Chancellor. And that's for Dick's. And then we get to use them on our site that's maddogentertainment.tv, where you can find our documentary, The PVIL Story Separate But Equal, about high school football in Texas during segregation, before integration. And these interviews will be on that site. And we'll also have a lot of the interviews we did on the documentary, because you can only use pieces of the documentary. And we got great stuff from Joe Green, Kenny Houston, Jimmy Johnson, Warren Moon, Andre Ware, Eric Dickerson, Jerry Levias, Super Bill Bradley, Johnny Rowland, and many more that'll be on maddogentertainment.tv. And I like Van was great. You get somebody that long, you can ask them to elaborate on things. You can ask them anything. And if you get things flowing, like Gary Kubiak and Van, they've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So did Bill Brown. We'll be doing more. So it's an honor to be able to do those, because those guys I always have looked up to. I'm a diehard Astros fan, a disgruntled diehard Astros fan. And listening to Bill Brown tell all his stories, Gary Kubiak telling his stories, and then Van Chancellor, it's an honor to be able to interview those guys.
What from all the interviews that you've done, what is one thing that you can remember off the top of your head that you didn't know before interviewing any of these guys?
Well, let's see. You have to do research. And
Yeah.
when the Comets won their 4 championships and played downtown or played at the Lakeview Church, which was the Compact Center,
Right.
before they moved downtown, my wife Carol and I went to a lot of their games, especially in the playoffs, because they had great crowds. And of course, they had great teams. It was fun to watch them. And then when they folded, and people were stunned that you could have a team that won 4 championships with a great coach, an Olympic coach, a Hall of Fame coach, and them just go out of business. So I was doing research on Van, and I'm like, whoa, did I know this? I forgot about this. I watched the both men's and women's Final Fours, and I watched the Don Staley, Gino Auriemma dust up, in which Gino showed no class whatsoever after that game. And Don had to be separated from Gino from prop attacking him. And so I saw Don Staley played the last season of her WNBA career for Van Chancellor and the Comets. And so I wanted to know more about that with Van. She had been coaching at Temple for like 8 years, because the WNBA season and the college season were separate. They didn't run at the same time. So she already knew what she wanted to do. And Van met her coaching the 2004 Olympic team. And he said, I got to get her on my team. So you were there, Carlos, so you know the stories he told.
Yeah.
And the best one to me was when I asked him, well, what would have happened if she'd have gotten past the people trying to stop her and got to Gino? And he's like, whoa. That'd been the end of Gino, no doubt in his mind.
Oh yeah.
Don would have kicked his butt. And of course, they got it all ironed out. But I thought, under the circumstances, one of the greatest women's players in history, and now one of the greatest coaches in history, did he see all that? And one thing he saw from her when they played was her toughness, her mental toughness, physical toughness, that competitiveness. And he said, I got to have her on my team. And he did. And they've been friends ever since. And I thought that was very, very interesting about Van Chancellor talking about that.
Yeah, that was a great story. I was as he was talking, I'm just like looking, and I was just hooked. It was fantastic. It's something that you have to witness live. It was such a great interview.
Rob Blanche has not given me anybody to interview that wasn't great. I did a thing with Bill Brown. We did it J Bar and Barbecue downtown months ago, in which we talked all about the Astros at the start of spring training, the stories, the preview of the Astros, and Bill's a great storyteller. Gary Kubiak, I've known Gary since he's a kid, and to have him sit still for an hour, but he wasn't in a hurry. When I'm interviewing people that long, I try to find out, are they shifting? Are they ready to go? And in each case, Rob Lynch had to signal me that's time to go. And so I love doing those. I've done some. At one point, a company got me to interview, let's see, Vince Young, Bruce Matthews, Clyde Drexler, and I had them for an hour. And it's always, you're going to get good stuff when you have good talkers who feel like talking and opening up. And they don't commit that kind of time if they don't feel comfortable. And that's why I love doing it. I will never, ever get tired of that. People say, why don't you do a book? Well, I don't want to do a book. It takes too much time and effort. And I'm not talking about interviewing somebody for hours and hours and hours over days and weeks. I just like to get them for 1 hour.
Right. No, agreed. No, it was great. It was a great interview. Again, please check them out. It's Dick's Sporting Goods. I think at Katy they do it, and then that's the one that was closest to me in Katy. And I think
we do the big one because that's their biggest store. It's got like 3 or 4 entrances to it.
Yeah, they do.
And those interviews are on Mad Dog Entertainment.tv along with our PBIL Separate But Equal documentary.
There you go. Yeah, please check those out. They're fantastic if you want to know a lot of the history, things that you weren't aware of. Like I said, that story that John just mentioned, like that was one of those things that you saw on TV, but then you never knew really like what was going on. What would have happened if she would have gone all the way through? That would nobody.
Yeah, man knows what would happen.
Yeah, he knows exactly. Welcome in, Rios. How are you?
Tired.
Yeah.
Hello, Rios. How are you?
Been a long day. I'm ready to retire.
You're ready to retire.
I just got 50 more years.
There you go. All right. So I want to transition over to the Texans, what they've done over this past in this offseason. I felt like that's last season. They didn't. I think they got guys like Ed Ingram. They got Trent Brown in the O line, and then a few pieces here and there. But then it almost seemed like it was kind of like bargain hunting for an offensive line. And then this year I felt like they were a little bit more aggressive to get guys like Smith, Wyatt Taylor as well. And so it felt like it was more intentional to get these these pieces and the offensive line to get some protection for CJ Stroud and some help on the backfield as well for David Montgomery. What are your thoughts on what the Texans have done this offseason in regards to the offensive line and maybe for protection for CJ Stroud?
We all know the biggest weakness, they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't run the ball inside the 5-yard line. They were pathetic. And it's not their fault they didn't have Joe Mixon. They thought they were going to have Mixon and they would pair Woody Marks with him as a change of pace. And then Joe entered the witness protection program, and we never saw him again. And they did as well as they could. But man, when they got down by the goal line,
Yeah.
they couldn't do squat. They're having to run gadget plays down by the goal line. And Montgomery had 8 touchdowns rushing last year. The Texans had 9. Over the last 3 years, Montgomery's had 33 touchdowns rushing. Texans have had 34. So he's a 230-pounder, knows how to get in the end zone. That's why I like the deal. I saw some people say, oh, my goodness, the Lions robbed him. And I'm like, what, a 4, a 7? Juice Scruggs wasn't going to make the team. Another failed draft choice by Nick Caserio. Nick has done a tremendous job everywhere but the offensive line. Now, Ariante Ursery, he was good, not great. You hope in his second season he's a lot better. Trent Brown, he's one stop. Trent Brown's coming off a knee injury. He weighs 400 and something. And then he couldn't play in the New England game. And he's going to always have injury issues. I'm not even sure he'll make the team. If Blake Fisher was any good when Brown couldn't play, he would have played right tackle. No, they moved Titus Howard to right tackle, put Jarrett Patterson in at left guard. He's not even a guard. He's a center. So that shows you what they think about Blake Fisher, another second-round pick. Now, maybe Blake in his 3rd season will be good, but, boy, you start to see a guy give you a preview of how good he's going to be going into his 2nd season, and he wasn't much better in the 1st. So I think this, Braden Smith's 30 years old. Wyatt Teller's going to be 32. Browns didn't try to re-sign Teller, and that's very telling to me. I think he ended the season on injured reserve. But I'll say this, when he was playing and he was healthy and he was younger, he was the biggest ass-kicking guard in the NFL. Exactly what the Texans need. A guy who wants to make the people across from him blow snot bubbles. They get hit so hard by him. But can he still play? Don't know. Can he protect? Don't know. If they think that Wyatt Teller is the answer at left guard and Trent Brown's the answer at right tackle, they're going to be going through this same stuff next year. That's why with 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, and I'm in the minority here, I think they need to use at least 2 of those on offensive linemen. An interior guy, I don't think Jake Andrews is, I think he's just average.
Agreed.
And they need an interior guy, preferably somebody plays guard and center. And I think they still need a young tackle. If Blake Fisher is not your guy, and it doesn't look like he is, and Trent Brown is going to be 33 or 34 and is susceptible to injuries, they got the maximum out of Trent Brown last year. I believe they won every game he started 7. But to think that he's going to be the starter or a good backup to Braden Smith, I'm not buying it. I want him to get 2 offensive linemen and 1 defensive tackle in the first 2 rounds. And Caserio had his news conference this week, and it's laughable. No, we're only going to take the best player available. We're not playing for need, drafting for need. Now, he said that last year. What was their biggest need? Offensive tackle. Duh. Ariante Ursery. Was he really the highest rated player on their board? Of course not. Stephon Diggs is gone. Tank Dell is going to miss the year. What do they do with Jaden Higgins, a wide receiver? Was he the highest rated player on their board? It's such a crock. Why do GMs actually say that? Now, if Caserio drafts a position other than the offensive line or defensive tackle, if he drafts a player they don't need, then I'll go, okay, he lived up to it. 23 top needs, quarterback, edge rusher. What did they get? Quarterback and edge rusher. Very seldom do teams actually draft the best player available. What they do is they draft the best player available at a need position. And I think they need to fortify that offensive line even more. And if they don't, they could be going through this same thing next year. Ed Ingram was a great trade, 6th-round pick for a former 2 that hadn't done squat with the Vikings. He came in, played well. Caserio gave him a nice extension.
Mhm.
And with him at right guard, Ursary at left tackle, wouldn't bother me at all if at some point this season they didn't have a rookie right tackle, maybe midway, maybe near the end, whenever Braden Smith slows down. He hadn't played 6 full season in years, but I do like the Smith signing. Teller, I'm not sure. It depends on the Wyatt Teller that they get.
Right. I do see your point on that one. Yeah. Years ago, like you said, Wyatt Teller would have been just, phenomenal. I did still like it because again, I felt like I feel like they're more intentionally trying this year to piece the O line together
You
better
can
than they
like
did the
Lakin
previous.
Tomlinson. Lakin Tomlinson
Yeah.
came here. He had started every game.
Yeah.
He was durable. He'd been with the 49ers. He is going to be 34. He was awful. Cam Robinson, the left tackle, from the moment they acquired those guys, starting with off-season program, they made them the starters. Robinson gone after 1 game. Tomlinson gone after like 5.
Yeah.
They blew it big time.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, Rios, what did you think? Do you agree with John on that they should go in for the first 2 picks for an interior lineman or anybody on the line? What do you think?
2 of the first 3.
I think the safe pick would be what John suggested, just because, like he mentioned, the guys that they'd signed in the offseason, they're all on the wrong side of 30. So you want to have at least a capable backup in case injury happens or they don't perform to what they expect them to perform this season.
If I had to pick another position, not the first round, the other position they need a backup tight end who can catch the ball, because Schultz might be there 1 more year. If he gets hurt and can't play, they don't have squat.
Yeah. At that point, like I know Sadiq is one of those guys that is mentioned, but he's probably going to go midway in there, so I don't think he would fall in that.
Draft a tight end.
The Texans.
Round.
I don't know. I don't think the Texans would even make an aggressive trade to go up.
No. And if you get him, you need to start him.
Problem. Sorry.
He's a starter.
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I just got cut up. I think I was coming behind. Y'all hear me now?
I can hear you. I've been able to hear you the whole time, and you sound good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was freezing on mine.
Now, Sadiq, there's no way they're going to do that. They don't need a tight end. They need a backup tight end, not a starter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what was being thrown around, that Sadiq, but I was like, I don't know. I don't think they would be that aggressive, but yeah, they need somebody as a tight end too to go over with Dalton Schultz, because Dalton Schultz has about 1 more year, I would say, and then but there's really nobody. Kate Stover, I don't know. I haven't really seen much of Kate Stover for it as a tight end too. Then you got after that, I mean, then he's injured too. He's going to be out for most of this year, if probably the whole year, because of from last season. So it's like, who do you have? They got from the Saints. I'm blowing blank on the name, but that's more of, I feel like that's more of a blocking tight end, if anything. But they do definitely need somebody. One more time.
He is a blocking tight end.
Yeah, exactly. So
can't remember his name either. Foster Moreau.
Foster Moreau. Thank you. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. But yeah, as far as that, is there anybody that you may have in mind, John, that may fit the Texans system from the offensive line, for any of the draft picks that Texans could use to bolster their offensive line, or even a tight end that you may have in mind?
I don't have any tight ends in mind because I've only paid attention to 2 of them. And they're not going to get the number 1 interior lineman from Penn State, Vega Ioane, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
They got a chance. Chase Biontis of the Aggies, a longtime offensive line coach, Mike Tice, former head coach. He was noted as one of the best offensive line coaches in the league when he was doing it. He praised Biontis like crazy. He may have even said he thought he's the second best lineman. I can't remember. And Pregnon from Oregon, either one of those 2. The offensive tackle, Blake Miller from Clemson, he started tackle for, I think, 4 years in college at a big-time program. And Ariante Ursary is not going anywhere for left tackle. So if they could get a kid at right tackle who started for 4 years, and I don't think he'll be there. I think there's going to be a run on tackles. 49ers pick right ahead of them, and just about everybody has Kyle Shanahan taking an offensive tackle because Trent Williams is going to be 38 and they got contract problems with him. And maybe he will. But there could be six tackles and one guard gone by the time the Texans pick. And if indeed one of those defensive tackles is higher rated on their board than any of the offensive linemen, then I think they should take the defensive tackle. And a lot of people have them taking a defensive tackle. Jonathan Alexander from the Chronicle in his last mock has 2 of the first 3 picks defensive linemen.
Yeah.
Now, I'd be willing to bet Jonathan just about anything he wants that 2 of the top 3 are not going to be defensive linemen because they know the defensive line is not an issue. Number one, Tommy Togiai, who started like 13th team last year, worked his way up. He was kicking butt at the end of the season, making big plays in every game. I can't wait to see him in the lineup next to Sheldon Rankins.
Right.
Logan Hall is going to come over and do the Danico Autry role. And Autry was a huge disappointment because he's suspended, he was injured, he just didn't have his act together at his age. And I'm still hoping they re-sign Barnett to a 1-year deal. I haven't given up on that because I think he has done a terrific job here coming off the bench, a former first-round pick of the Eagles. And defensive tackle with Rod Wright and Matt Burke, defensive line was his specialty. And then, of course, D'Amico, to me, is the best coach position on this team because they take guys other teams didn't want, like Mario Edwards, Barnett, there's others, and they make plays, and they do well. And then a couple like Rankins go off with the big money Cincinnati, bomb out, come back, play well again. D'Amico knows, and Caserio does not draft anybody D'Amico doesn't want on either side of the ball. Because D'Amico, if he didn't want him, he didn't like him, he didn't have to play him. He has control of the game day roster. So D'Amico has certain qualities he likes in a defensive tackle. And it's not just defensive tackle, it's the right, the left. And they find guys that fit what they want, and then they coach them up. And that's why guys like Tommy Togiai, another gift from Cleveland, come here and play so much better than they do anywhere else.
No, agreed. And you mentioned Ed Ingram earlier too, being that one of those guys that I felt came over and they made him better.
They did.
I will say, so the linebacker position is another one that's also been thrown around in there. What do you think about the linebacker? Do you think they address anything this during the draft, or is it something that they could also maybe look for undrafted guys just to be maybe look something after Aziz or somebody to complement Aziz?
They'll have a lot of undrafted rookie linebackers because they have to play special teams. And I think they'll draft a linebacker. I just don't think they'll be in the first 2 rounds.
Right.
This guy's not going to start. They only start 2 linebackers. And that would be Aziz Al-Shire and Henry To'oTo'o. And then E.J. Speed's back. Speed did a really good job.
He did.
Christian Harris turned out to be a huge disappointment.
Big time.
When we watched him make those big plays in the playoff game against Cleveland, my goodness, I thought in 24, that kid's going to step up. He's not going to play like a 3rd-round pick. He's going to play like a 1st-round pick. And he was hurt a lot. And then he was benched this year because To'oTo'o just roared past him. So linebackers in good shape with those 3. They also have some guys coming back. But I think in this case, Caserio will, once he gets past the first 2 or 3 rounds, not pay attention to much as need, and linebackers got to play special teams. They, along with the safeties, they got to be good. And Frank Ross is as good as any special teams coordinator in the NFL. And when he sees guys out there, they'll say, now, what do you think about him for your needs on special teams? So, and then we know Caserio is going to make trades. A lot of teams are going to try to get picks from 27 because that's supposed to be a great draft, not just quarterbacks, but other positions. So I think we'll see Caserio make deals in which he will acquire an extra couple of picks in 27.
Yeah, that Caserio shines a lot, I think, in my opinion, and in a little bit in the later rounds as well. And I think he's done a fantastic job in there, like you said earlier. He's done a fantastic job when it comes to that, but just the O line has always been his Achilles heel.
I don't understand. They have different offensive line coaches every other year, and then they're gone. And maybe Cole Popovich will be the one that lasts more than 2 years. But they can't get the offensive line coach right either. Maybe they have it right now. Hopefully, if you're a Texans fan, he's the guy to coach these guys up. And but boy, not just who he wants to play the way he wants, but then Nick Caley's got to call the plays that takes advantage of what they do. So I'm fired up about Montgomery, and I'm really fired up about what the way the players swear by Cole Popovich. And the new quarterback coach, Plinsky, who won 3 Super Bowl rings in New England, I just continue to be blown away, mystified that they keep bringing in people from New England, people that weren't even there when Caserio was there.
Right.
When they brought back James Ferentz to coach tight ends, I tweeted again, memo to the McNairs, put an addendum in Caserio's contract saying he cannot acquire in any way anybody played for the Patriots or even change planes at Logan International Airport or even flew over Foxborough. And I told that to Cal McNair, and he chuckled, and he said, where do you think James Ferentz went after we had him? And I'm like, you're kidding me. Turned out James had played like 5 years with the Patriots. And also I think they need to tell him nobody else from that football factory, John Carroll University in Cleveland. If you're going to get one of your alma maters, instead of getting Knicks, get D'Amico's. Get players and coaches from D'Amico's alma mater.
Alabama.
Yeah. Alabama. So so you mentioned the new quarterbacks, Coach. I was going to ask you, speaking of the quarterbacks, what are your thoughts on how we all saw how the season ended last season with just CJ Stroud kind of having
Rios got it.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to keep it there. I know. Rios is the expressive one over here. So the way that the season ended with CJ Stroud, and in your opinion, you've seen this years after years after years, John. How does a quarterback kind of come back from this?
Fans have more trouble coming back from something like that than players do. Mm-hmm. Players learn how to blow things off. Now, obviously, CJ knows he had one of the worst games in the history of the pro football in the playoffs. And one of the things I blame is why did Nick Caley have him throwing the ball so much in a close game when your defense just scored 2 touchdowns? Your defense was the best in the NFL. Mm-hmm. The only thing you had to do on offense is don't turn it over. And Woody Marks doesn't fumble. His team was great about not fumbling. And so what they do, they go out and they make him throw the ball a lot. In Foxborough, in January, I thought it was a terrible game plan, and I felt bad for CJ when it started to mushroom. He wasn't very good at Pittsburgh, but he did make some throws, and the defense played great. So then they went in they couldn't say they threw a lot because they were way behind. They weren't way behind. So I thought that was as much on Nick Caley as anybody. And we knew they're going to pick up the fifth year option, which will pay him 25 something. and they'll sign Will Anderson to a contract that makes him the highest paid defensive player in history, or number 2 to Micah Parsons. And then next year, they'll re-sign CJ unless that performance is a tip of the iceberg, which nobody believes it is. And his agent, David Mulligetta, he can always tell CJ, hey, they're doing you a favor. By the time we do negotiations next year, that could be 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks signed for even more than Dak Prescott, $60 million. You might end up somewhere close to $70 million a year. CJ said, I'll sign up for that. So I just don't think that that's something that's going to bother CJ. But the thing is, it doesn't matter what he does in regular season. He fit fine in the regular season for what they gave him. A mediocre offensive line and a terrible running game. That's on them. And I think he'll come back. Hopefully the running game will be a lot better, and I think it will be, especially when they get inside the 5 with Montgomery. And I think they will help CJ. They'll give him a tight end, a backup who can catch. I think they'll add another receiver, because you can't just automatically say, okay, Tank Dell is back, baby, until you see him out on the field. Every time I look at Tank and I see those legs that are about the size of my finger, and thinking the injuries that he had and what happens when he gets hit again. So they can't just say, okay, Tank's coming back. He's going to be even better than he was as a rookie. So I think they will either draft another receiver, maybe 3rd or 4th round, and or maybe sign another veteran. There's still guys out there, but they'll do everything they can to help CJ Stroud, because their reputations are they're at stake as well. And Splinsky, obviously Casario wanted him. Cayley worked with him. He wanted him. Popovich worked with him. He wanted him. So they all wanted him. Now, they said that Gerard Johnson, it was a mutual decision. Yeah, right. Give me a break. You don't tell them at the combine when all the jobs were almost filled that I think I want to go in another direction. Anyway, I'm glad to see him get picked up by Philadelphia and working with Jalen Hurts. But I'm eager to see what these guys do. Cayley, like a player, should be better in his second year as a play caller. Bobby Slowick should have been, but Bobby didn't adjust to what the defensive coordinators adjusted to. When they have an entire offseason to watch every play 1,000 times that CJ Stroud did, and they change their strategy, you've got to be ready for that. And Bobby wasn't. And I don't think Bobby should have been fired. But if you can't get your guy to do what you want, and you're the boss, you got to make changes. And D'Amico, that may be the toughest decision he has to make as a head coach, because they were really close.
Yeah, it's a tight knit group, from with that. So I think, I agree with you. It's definitely had to be a tough choice for D'Amico to do. Yeah.
When you have to fire your friends, I hate to tell y'all who told me this, but he's exactly right. Bill O'Brien told me in his second season, worst decision that head coaches make when he gets his first job is you hire your friends. You've been an assistant coach a long time. Your buddies have been assistant coaches. If I get hired first, I'm bringing you in. You get hired first, you bring me in. So they do. And then after that first year, if you don't fire your friends, who you know deep down are not going to be able to coach the way you want it, you got to make tough decisions. And that was a tough decision by D'Amico, because your friends will get you fired.
Yeah.
Basically, him or his friend at that point, like, whose job's more important? I like being employed. Let me.
Yeah. At this point, it becomes every man for himself. That's how it is. Yeah. All right. So Okay, so pretty good insight on that on the Texans, and I think I'm done with talking about the Texans here. I want to mention about the Titans now. We were on our show. We've been doing like draft situations for the Titans. There was like trade things that were going on yesterday about something with the Cowboys and the Titans that they wanted to make a trade. I felt like it was blown out of proportion. Because Jerry, like, Jerry's going to be Jerry. He's always going to have like a flashy, um, like a flashy pick, something that's going to happen. But I think people were talking about transfer.
He was the most unflashy first round pick in the NFL last year. The guy was great. He took a guard. People always say that about Jerry because he's Jerry Jones.
Right.
But they talked him into taking Booker. And people are trying to say, oh, Jerry Jones is going to trade up to get David Bailey or Arvell Reese. Well, I can't imagine the Jets would pass up one of those pass rushers when Aaron Glenn's job is on the line, and they're not going to get a quarterback. They're going to wait till next year, probably tank, not like the NBA tanking, but still tanking. Then there's Arizona.
Right.
The best player in this draft is Jeremiyah Love.
Right.
Arizona re-signed James Conner, their starting running back. They signed free agent Tyler Algier from Atlanta. And so why would they take a running back? Because when they signed, they did those things. They knew Love was going to be there. And they knew he was great. Great runner, great receiver, great blocker. Marcus Freeman was on, I hate to get these wrong, Pat McAfee, and he said Love is the best player he's ever had. Now, Texans fans better hope the Titans don't take him. I think they're going to take him. I do two talk shows up there every week. And as I've told the host, when I come on, I want you to play the Beatles song, All You Need Is Love. And the guy's great in every way. And I say, okay, the Oilers were terrible. And in 1978, Bum Phillips, the coach general manager, made a trade to get the first overall pick. He took running back Earl Campbell, and they went to the playoffs 3 years in a row, including 2 AFC championship games. When in 96, the last year the Oilers were here, the general manager, Floyd Reese, took Eddie George. Eddie George and Steve McNair together helped him go to a Super Bowl 3 years later. Another 2 up there, Chris Johnson, 2,000-yard rusher, helped him get in the playoffs, perennial contender. And then Derrick Henry, what did he do for that franchise? They made a humongous mistake letting him get away. And so if they pass up Jeremiyah Love, I said on my show, the Titans war room, we're here cheering from Houston, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis because they passed up Jeremiyah Love. To me, that's the biggest question of the first round. Mm-hmm. Now, Jerry Jones doesn't have a 2. If he's going to trade up, say with Arizona at 3, some people have said Jeremiyah Love. Why would he do that? He re-signed Javonte Williams. Mm-hmm. He had a terrific season. Their offense is great. They don't need offense. They need defense, specifically edge rusher and a corner. If they keep their picks, they're going to be able to get a good corner and a guy that could be a good edge rusher. And then if they'd have to trade both of those, then they'd have to trade something next year if you're going to move up that far. Mm-hmm. Like the Texans, when the Texans, Rick Smith did it with Cleveland to get Sean Watson. Cleveland did a terrible job. Didn't get anywhere near what they could have. But when Andy Reid traded up to get Patrick Mahomes, people are like, oh, my God, he gave up so much. Well, that's because he had the farthest to come up. Yeah. And that would be everybody knows. Usually you don't trade 2 ones to move up unless it's for a quarterback. And I'd be stunned if the Cowboys did it. But the fact that it's the Cowboys and it's out there, it gets more attention for the talk show hosts, the bloggers, podcasters, everybody, when it's involving Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. But I'll say this, it would be something to me to say Washington and he's a running back. traded up to 3 to get him.
I can see that because you need someone to pair with Jaden Daniels because their running game was without Jaden Daniels, there was no run game last season for the Commanders.
And another thing about the running backs are coming back in vogue. Seattle with Clint Kubiak as the coordinator. Clint's like his daddy. He has to have a good running game because they keep the quarterback under center so much, and they play the bootleg game where you fake it and you roll out, you hit the tight end cutting across, or the wide receiver cutting across, or everybody goes to the right, and the back, like Arian Foster, takes it, makes one, plants, and goes to the hole. And that's the way Clint did it. And Team C, how did Seattle win the Super Bowl? Well, they did it with a two-headed running game. And then when Zach Charbonneau got hurt, Kenneth Walker had to step up by himself, and he was the MVP, and now he got a big contract from Kansas City. So Washington it wouldn't surprise me, Dan Quinn is desperate. They say his job's on the line to see them try to trade with Arizona to get Love one spot ahead of the Titans.
Yeah. I would be surprised as well if the Titans didn't pick Jeremiyah Love because, I mean, like you mentioned the history, they've always had they've had really good luck with running backs. And you named them, starting from from Earl Campbell all the way down to Derrick Henry. So they've had a pretty good run with running backs. So it would make sense for them to take a run at Jeremiyah Love, especially right in the position that they're in.
The other thing to remember, Cam Ward needs help.
Yes.
How's an edge rusher going to help him? How many touchdowns an edge rusher going to get? Yes, they're important, but when you have a rookie quarterback, you have to run the ball. Yeah. And when you're moving into a new stadium in 27 and you're trying to sell club seats and PSLs and regular tickets and suites, everything, you better have some pizzazz. You better be able to score. You don't want to win games 17-13. You got to put points on the board. Al Davis told all his people, I want early in the draft people that can put it in the end zone. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver. We'll take offensive line and defensive players, but first, you got to score touchdowns. And that's what the Titans need to do. I've seen some mock drafts say they're going to take an edge rusher.
Right.
And they would get a good one because Robert Saleh is a defensive coach. Well, Robert Saleh can coach anybody. And he has signed one free agent, and he traded for another edge rusher, and he's got Jeremy Simmons. So they brought in 2 new starters and to go with Simmons. So their defensive line ought to be pretty good. And the other one was, well, when their GM Mike Begonzi with Kansas City, they just blew off the running game. Well, it's because they have one of the greatest quarterbacks in history. And how do we know that Mike Begonzi was not banging on Andy Reid's door? You got to take this running back in the first round. We don't know that. But those are the things they're using for logic. And maybe they'll be right. And if they could get one of those great edge rushers, do it. But there's a chance Bailey and Reese will be on second and third.
Right.
And unless you want Reuben Baines, who not only had the wreck in which the girl died, which all came out, and I see all these media people, well, everybody's known about that. Well, why haven't you written it? Why haven't you talked about it? And Outkick, one of their writers, Trey Wallace, he found out Baines had another ticket for reckless driving going over 100 this past year. Now, if you don't learn your lesson from somebody getting killed at 4 a.m. and you're still driving like that, you should get some NIL money and go to Georgia.
Yeah. It's, jeez.
I mean,
yeah. So, talking about the Titans, one of our friends, Mr. First Down, a huge Titans fan, wanted me to ask you, what were your thoughts on Coach Dave McGinnis, and if you have anything, any memories that you have with Dave McGinnis?
How much time do we have? I got memories of Dave McGinnis that I could talk about for 3 hours. I knew him over 3 decades.
Mhm.
I met him when he was with the Bears. He
Yeah.
was assistant coach, and he was started in '86. It wasn't Buddy Ryan's great defense in '85 that was 15-1 and dominated New England in the Super Bowl that set the all-time record for fewest points allowed. It was the next year when Vince Tobin took over the defense, and that was Mac's first year. Jeff Fisher went with Buddy to Philadelphia. And I read a story with Dave quoted one time in Chicago that he liked to eat Mexican food and drink Diet Dr. Pepper. So at the following combine, I looked him up, introduced myself, told him who I was, and I was from Waco and Baylor. He is from Snyder and TCU. We just hit it off.
Mhm.
And the first chance I had when he was in Arizona, he took me to a couple of dives off of downtown. Great Mexican food menu on the board, but it was in Spanish and I couldn't read it. And drank a lot of Diet Dr. Pepper. And I would go to training camp. I was covering the NFL because it was between the Oilers and the Texans coming. And I'd go to University of Northern Arizona because he always said it's cold up there in August. Well, I couldn't imagine that because they went up to such a high altitude, but it was.
Yeah.
And he had Diet Dr. Pepper imported, found a Mexican place, and I had more fun with him. He was offered when he was at Arizona, he interviewed for the Bears head coaching job. He didn't have the contract done. He's on his way back to the airport. Radio was on, I'm guessing in a cab. There was no Uber then. He had the radio on, and all of a sudden, they announced there's a press conference being called to announce Dave McGinnis as the new coach. And he's like, well, they didn't have a deal done. And he hadn't told anybody at Arizona. And he hadn't told anybody with Chicago. So he called their chairman, Ed McCaskey, who had married into the McCaskey family, and backed out, said, I'm not going to do it. They didn't say, okay, let's work out the contract. He thought that they were disloyal, didn't have integrity, and he did. So he went back there a year later. He was named Arizona's coach. And Dave was a funny guy, great talker. I always told him, man, if you didn't coach, you'd be great on TV or the radio, talk shows, anything, just because of his sense of humor. And he was funny. And he's a great people person. Well, he and Jeff Fisher needed a linebackers coach the year McGinnis was fired by the Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
And McGinnis was telling people he was going to do TV a year and then see what's out there. At the Senior Bowl, I talked to Jeff Fisher. I said, you need a linebackers coach, right? Have you talked to Dave McGinnis? He said, well, he told me that he's going to do TV for a year and see what's out there. I said, let me get back to you. I called Dave and I said, Fisher's a great guy, he's a great coach. Nashville's a great city. Everybody loves the team. You and Kim would go in there and love it because they loved Arizona. And he always kept a home in Arizona. So he called Fisher back. They talked and he got hired. And then when Jeff was fired and went to St. Louis, he went with him. Then when they were fired out there, he came back and took the color analyst job on their flagship, replacing Frank Wycheck, who started here with the Oilers and then went there. And Dave was great for 9 years. And one of the things I'll miss the most is when the Titans would come to NRG Stadium, I'd be in my seat on the top row, close to the entrance, where I have a permanent seat there. Mm-hmm. And he would come over when he's coming up for the booth, probably 3 hours before the game, sit there next to me, and we'd BS for like 30 minutes. And I always called him when I was in Nashville. He made charity appearances with me. And it is an incredible loss for his family, his friends, his fans, because everybody loved Coach Mack.
Wow. Yeah, incredible. Definitely an incredible loss in the football community for sure. And you were the perfect guy to ask. Like, hey, so I wanted just to share. I know it wasn't very specific, but I was just share something that you remember from Coach McGinnis. I think that was great. Thank you so much for that one.
Sure.
And last, you've covered last question that we have from one of our friends here. You've covered football for a long time. Even Coach Vance Chancellor said that you had more, what is that, more intel than the NFL itself, or somewhere along the lines of that when he saw you there.
He was being nice.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. So one of our friends, Nick Bodkins, wanted to know, in your since you've been doing this, who was the first, in your opinion, that stands out? Who was the first ever can't miss prospect that you saw that was a hit, and maybe one that you thought was going to be a hit but ended up kind of not being a hit at all?
Earl Campbell is the greatest power running back I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I love to go to Canton. I've probably been to Canton 50 times.
Mm.
And one thing I really like is when it's closed down during the game, that the preseason game. And because I've been on committee 33 years, I can get in and I go into their theater and you push a button and you see all the highlights of a player. And there's certain players I watch every year. None do I watch more than Earl Campbell because I covered him. I loved watching him play. I did the first story ever done on him for Texas Football Magazine going into his senior year at John Tyler High School in 1973 when I was working for my first year at the Waco Tribune Herald for Dave Campbell while I was a junior at Baylor. And Earl was a linebacker, and he was being moved to running back, and some Southwest Conference coaches had told Dave Campbell, the founder of Texas football, we think this kid's going to be great. So he had me do a story on him, and I was honored to do it. And Earl, he couldn't catch a cold, but boy, he could run over and around anybody. And it was a pleasure to watch him. And the Oilers had 4 Hall of Famers that I covered during the Love You Blue era. It was Earl, Carly Cup, Robert Brazil, and Elvin Bethea. And then when they got into was a run and shoot era, they had 3, Warren Moon, Bruce Matthews, and Mike Munchak. And I love covering those guys. And I love covering J.J. Watt and Andre Johnson, too. J.J. got 2 more years, and he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And join Andre Johnson is representing the Texans. And as far as guys that I thought were going to be, there's disappointments.
Right.
Kenyon Green was a tremendous disappointment. First round pick from A&M, and they needed him so much.
They did.
And he wasn't ready for the NFL. And I was trying to go back of players drafted by the Oilers, and they blew a lot of picks back then. And trying to think, one of the funniest stories, this would have been the worst pick, and I did have high hopes for him. They were desperate for a kicker, and Mike Holloway was the general manager. He'd been the personnel director, and then when Ladd Herzing was fired after the 89 season, Mike was promoted. And Mike was already 80 years old, and he was on his way to retirement. So they needed a kicker, and I'll never forget, they drafted a kicker named Joe Wood. And there was a Hall of Fame baseball player named Smokey Joe Wood. So we were calling him Smokey Joe Wood. So we got him on a conference call, and he comes on and talks about how excited he is to be able to kick in the NFL, get to come to Houston. And we're thinking, boy, he kicked 50, 55-yard field goals back when that was a big deal. And we asked him, when are you going to get here? He said, well, I got to do my 4-year Air Force commitment first.
Oh.
And when we got to talk to Mike Holloway, we're like, Mike, you're not going to get Joe Wood for 4 years because he's got an Air Force commitment. And he goes, oh.
That might have been
his probably reaction. Oh.
Wow. So what's your 4-year plan before we get Joe Wood over here?
And he must have done very well in the Air Force because Joe never did kick again. Never kicked in the NFL. In fact, I got to Google him sometime. He may be a general somewhere.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. 4 years. You have to wait.
I didn't cover John Matuzak.
Yeah.
They took the twos first overall, and he was a huge bust. But he figured into one of the greatest trades in history. When I think of the franchise, the Oilers or the Titans,
Right.
I tell them the greatest trade was Earl Campbell because of what he meant to the franchise.
Mhm.
But in 1975, the Oilers, Bum Phillips, Sid Gilman, they traded the twos to Kansas City for nose tackle Curly Culp, who turned out to be the best in history, enshrined in the Hall of Fame, played there 7 years, and a first-round pick.
Mhm.
First-round pick was Robert Dr. Doom Brazil.
Mhm.
So they got 2 Hall of Famers
What a
in
name.
one trade for a guy that was a huge bust. And yes, the twos were traded to the Raiders, and he helped them win a Super Bowl in '80. But boy, first overall, he's a big steroid guy. When you're drafted first overall, big things are expected of you, and he never produced them. But boy, if he'd have been good, they wouldn't have had Curly Culp and Robert Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah, hindsight's always 2020.
Right. Yeah. John, it's as always, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show, man. Thank you so much for again joining us right pre-draft like you do always. So again, thank you so much, and it's always wonderful to hear your stories.
It's my pleasure. Remember, go on maddogentertainment.tv for the PVIL story, our documentary on the Prairie View Interscholastic League when it operated independently of the all-white University Interscholastic League. These interviews with Dick's Sporting Goods, 713 series. We're going to have so many interviews on that site, and I can't wait to do more. Guys, thank you very much, as always.
Thank you, John. It's always a pleasure. The great Hall of Famer, John McClain again. All right, guys, that's going to be it for us this week. Check us out next week. It'll be draft week. So we're going to be on, and we're going to be looking live at the draft picks live on our show. That'll be it. Thank you guys for joining us. See y'all next week. Peace. Bye. Thank you, John.
Carlos, can you link to the show, please?
Yes, sir. Gotcha.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Have a good one.
Bye.
Tell them bring on the blitz. 20 of my dogs on this.